Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating analysis of global events that's going to completely change how you look at your nightly newsfeed. We're stepping past the standard political rhetoric and the flashy headlines to examine a really provocative core thesis that the current geopolitical shifts and conflicts we're seeing all over the world right now are actually a massive, hidden civil war playing out within global capital itself. We are diving deep into the money, the infrastructure, and the underlying business models that actually dictate global policy. To really understand this shift, we have to start with a fundamental question. Why exactly is the forever war model coming to an end? For decades, perpetual conflict has just seemed like the default state of the world. But the source material argues that this old way the world operated is fracturing right before our very eyes. And here's the kicker, it's not happening for moral or humanitarian reasons. Not at all. It is happening for purely financial ones. The global profit machine is upgrading and its needs have radically changed. Okay, just think about this number for a second, 93%. According to the data, the United States has been at war for roughly 93% of its almost 250-year history. That is literally only about 15 to 20 years of actual total peace. And historically, war hasn't just been about ideology, it's basically been humanity's most profitable business model. War generates an absolutely endless demand for weapons, it justifies these massive, bloated defense budgets, and eventually it leads to incredibly lucrative reconstruction contracts. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the business of forever wars, the true rulers of global power, the FIC, MIC, and TIC factions, why AI demands stability, the proxy pivot, and lastly, the new digital control grid. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The business of forever wars. The analysis outlines 4 primary methods used by financial powers to essentially crack a country open and gain control of its resources. First up, sanctions. This is like cutting off trade completely, as we saw with Iran back in 2018. Second, freezing assets. This means blocking a nation's access to the global dollar bloodstream, like what happened in Panama in 1988. Third, there's outright war, which sparks severe inflation, pushes the population to revolt, and paves the way for new leadership. And finally, if all of that fails, propaganda, funding internal opposition through culture and media to literally tear a country apart from the inside. The ultimate goal across every single one of these methods: collapse the economy so its resources can be privatized and scooped up by the Western financial system. So when you see these events blowing up on your timeline, you're usually watching one of these 4 extraction methods happening in real time. Section 2. The true rulers. Redefining global power. Now, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast in how power is structured globally. On one hand, in sovereign nations like China or Russia, the government sits firmly at the top and dictates exactly what capital is allowed to do. But contrast that with the Western model. Over here, the structure is totally flipped upside down. Capital, meaning the giant asset managers, the mega banks, the massive corporations, they actually sit on top. The politicians, well, they're essentially just employees, or frankly, piñatas for the public to hit, while the actual world-shifting decisions are made by the financial interests funding their campaigns. Moving to Section 3, FIC, MIC, and TIC. To understand the factions fighting for control, the source introduces a brilliant framework. First, we have the FIC, the financial industrial complex. Think Wall Street, the mega banks, the major asset managers, and increasingly the crypto lobby. The FIC essentially finances the entire global system. Their ultimate superpower is the US dollar, which they use to control the literal plumbing of the global economy, dictating who gets to trade and who gets totally cut off. Ultimately, the FIC is the grand prize that the other 2 factions we're about to talk about are desperately fighting to control.
Next up, we have the MIC, the military-industrial complex. This is the old guard, the traditional war economy. We're talking defense contractors, weapons manufacturers, and the lobbyists constantly pushing for military intervention. Now, the MIC relies entirely on continuous global conflict and proxy wars to generate their immense, reliable profits. To them, peace is just a terrible business environment. They absolutely need the FIC to keep funding their emergency budgets just to stay afloat.
And finally, the new heavyweight stepping into the ring, the TIC, or the technological industrial complex. This is big tech, the Silicon Valley heavy hitters, artificial intelligence, and massive data infrastructure. They represent the shiny, heavily funded future of global capital. And here is where the real drama happens. The TIC is actively pulling the FIC's investment dollars away from the MIC, which is kicking off a massive, behind-the-scenes economic civil war. Section 4, AI demands global stability. This brilliantly illustrates the core conflict of our era. The MIC needs chaos. It needs destroyed cities and continuous fighting to justify its existence. But the tick desperately needs stability. I mean, think about it. You literally cannot build a trillion-dollar, globally connected AI energy grid in a world that is constantly on fire. Data centers need incredibly reliable power, supply chains have to function flawlessly, and global shipping lanes absolutely must remain open. This direct contradiction is causing a literal war within the profit machine itself.
Section 5, the proxy pivot. Now, the source presents a very neutral, purely financial lens on some heavily debated historical alliances. It argues that for decades, Israel has effectively served as a strategic proxy for the MIC's interests. In a region that is resource-rich and highly strategic, the historical role was essentially to maintain just enough regional instability and tension to continuously fuel the forever war model. This guaranteed a permanent, lucrative market for the military-industrial complex.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is how incredibly fast this is shifting because of the tick. A decade ago, political backing for this proxy model was just unquestioned. But jump to 2024, and we're seeing the rise of heavily tick-funded politicians like J.D. Vance, backed by major tech figures like Peter Thiel. Look at where we are right now. We are seeing coordinated, very public criticism of military actions by figures who historically would never ever have spoken out. Why? Because the tick needs an exit narrative. Regional instability is no longer a massive profit driver, it is a major economic liability to the new AI infrastructure. That's why you're suddenly seeing politicians on your TV screen criticize actions they would have blindly supported a decade ago. The money backing them has fundamentally changed. There's a quote from the source that perfectly encapsulates the sheer scale of what we are watching unfold on the news every single night. We are watching a civil war inside the profit machine itself. Two factions of the same system fighting over which business model will run the future. It's honestly mind-blowing when you frame it like that. It's not just nations fighting nations anymore. It's the old war economy fighting the new tech economy for total dominance. Section 6, the digital control grid. So, what does this new ecosystem actually look like in reality? Well, the old war-as-a-service model is rapidly being replaced by a highly profitable tech ecosystem. The big capital is now flowing directly into massive AI data centers, advanced robotics, surveillance microchips, sprawling digital infrastructure projects, and highly lucrative long-term rebuilding contracts. The financial logic here is honestly undeniable. Rebuilding has become vastly superior to bombing. The Gulf states, the FIC, and the TIC have all realized that if you finance the rebuilding of a nation, you own their ports, you run their data centers, you control their digital payment rails, and you just sit back and collect interest for the next 30 years. It yields massive long-term dividends that the old hit-and-run war model just simply cannot compete with anymore. The TIC has successfully convinced the FIC that financing data centers is simply a much better, much safer investment than bombing cities.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly profound question to ponder as we wrap up. As the profit machine transitions and the forever war model slowly fades into history, does this actually bring humanity true peace? Or are we simply witnessing the quiet dawn of a highly centralized, virtually inescapable digital control grid? The business model is clearly changing, but it seems the pursuit of centralized global power remains exactly the same. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.